We've all, at some point in our lives, lost somebody. One of the key people in me kind of growing up in my journey to being a man died quite suddenly. He was the guy who trained me. When you learn to be a vicar, you get placed with someone, so you're like the new guy, and you have 3 years working alongside someone, and you work with them and you learn from them, and you end up being, well, quite like them, or doing it their way, or occasionally you decide to do it the exact opposite, but that's what happens. The guy I did that with, I actually ended up spending 5 years there. I was there a year early on placement. I was there for 3 years as a curate, and then I stayed on to do some extra stuff. So we were pretty tight, and he was an outgoing so-and-so, and he managed to fall from a 5th story building, and that's basically the end of him on this earth. And that's pretty hard to deal with. I hadn't made the time to spend much time with him. I hadn't recently, and I kind of thought I would at some point, but you know how it is. And now he's gone. I've had a life full of losing people. I spoke to a kid the other day who was like 22, and he's like, I still haven't been to a funeral of anyone I'm related to. And I was like, blimey heck, by 22. My granddad died when I was 7. I had aunts and uncles I lost, and great aunts and great uncles, and it just seemed one after the other. And nearly 10 years ago now, my own father died, and so I've had a lot of processing of grief. And part of my job is to do people's funerals, and so you get to that privilege of walking through people's grief and difficulty. Sometimes, especially as blokes, we don't deal with our grief. We don't deal with our crap. And that means we end up doing dumb stuff because it's all underneath somewhere in here and we're not really dealing with it. The way I like to talk about emotions is, imagine you're in a car and there's a toddler in the car. If you've got a toddler in the car, I've got 3 kids, so I know what this is like. You would never, ever dream of letting the toddler drive. That's a recipe for disaster. But also, if you're driving the car, you do not go more than 5 minutes without checking on the toddler, because all hell might have broken loose. So your emotions are like the toddler in your car. You don't let them drive, but you don't ignore them either. And that's how I think we need to deal with our emotions. And when it comes to grief and loss and people dying, it's going to happen. Death and taxes, the only things you can count on, absolutely. But we need to be ready. We need to be ready for how we're going to deal with grief. Or we need to go, actually, I never dealt with that. I've tried to sweep it under the carpet and I'm struggling. So there are these things called the 7 stages of grief. The 7 things that we all pretty much work through in our own way. The first thing that happens to us, stage 1, is shock and denial. It's just a shock. We deny it. Our brain can't process it, and we don't really deal. The second thing is pain and guilt. We kind of go, well, what could I and should I have done? We feel that intense, almost physical pain of loss. And then we move on. In all of these sections, I'm talking about moving on in months and years. I'm not talking about days, unless it's somebody who isn't particularly close to us. So the third thing is anger and bargaining. We get angry, we kind of make deals with kind of God, but kind of somebody that if you do this, then I'll do that. Then somehow if I'm really good, then they'll come back, or they'll be okay. Or it's just, we're trying to process and make sense of it. And we get angry and we start to try and make bargains. The fourth stage is often the hardest. This is the point where we reflect and we stop, and it really sinks in, and we get sad and we feel lonely. And by the time we've hit this stage, actually the people who were all round us at the start and cared because we'd lost somebody, most of them have gone because the time's gone on a bit now, and they've kind of moved on and not forgotten, but it's not on their frontal lobe right now. And then we get into this stage and it's just lonely and sad. And this is where we can either shove it under the carpet, or we can just keep going and forget about it, and it starts to eat at us. And this is the point where actually we need to get alongside people. This is the point where you want to just pull away, and actually you need to come forwards and find some people and talk to somebody. Talk to somebody who's ready to listen, somebody, well, I was going to say wears a collar like me, but I don't right now. But do you know what I mean? That's where the caring professions, the people who care, you can go and seek someone out, you can get some counselling, whatever it might be, and just go, oh, well, I need to process this stuff. And that's where we need to talk. Even those of us who don't find it easy to get in touch with what we think and feel, it still helps to just have somebody to talk to. And there will be people. There's always the Samaritans if you can't find anyone else. And then the last three are all the way forwards. There's a stage 5, which is an upward turn. There's a sense that actually it's still all going on and I can still feel it, but I'm coming round the corner. I'm coming to a place where actually this doesn't affect me in everyday life. It's not a heavy sadness. I'm starting to move on. It's still painful, but I can see light at the end of the tunnel type stuff. And the 6th one is then working through, well, like, how am I going to deal with this? I've lost this person, this is the effect they're going to have, this is how I'm going to deal with the practicalities and the stuff and all, you know, and I'm going to get somewhere. And I feel like there's some hope now. And that leads us to the 7th one, which is acceptance and hope. It's when we accept that, yeah, this person has died. I accept this, I know it's happened, but I now have hope for the future despite my difficult and terrible loss. And I can live in the light of who they were. And maybe that's the point where we go, hey, Alan, this guy who died, for me, I want to be more like him. I want to tell more people. He was desperate to tell everyone about Jesus, and I want to tell more people just how good it is to have life with Jesus. And that's what he taught me to do, and what I want to do. And he's great. He was great at apprenticing people and helping young people to grow and like be who they were made to be. And those are both things that I want to like accept and move forwards. And I'm not at that stage yet, but I'm looking forward to that stage because I've been through these journeys of grief before. It's hard. It's really hard to lose anybody. Sometimes it's hard to lose a dog, let alone a human being. But it's something we all will or have gone through, been through, will be going through. And especially as guys, we need to know how to do it, not just kind of pretend we're tough and it's all okay. Some of you guys, some people who've worked for the military or you've worked in certain circumstances, you've seen loads of it. And you're carrying it around like the biggest burden on your shoulders you've ever seen. Somehow that needs to be dealt with before it deals with you. So what I'm saying to you is, in grief and in every emotion, think about that car. Don't let your emotions, the toddler, drive the car. Stay in control. But do not go any significant amount of time without having a check in the rearview mirror and seeing what that toddler in the back's doing. Because otherwise there could be anything, anywhere. And before you know it, it's affected the whole car and the whole direction you're going in. Let's deal with our stuff. Let's be real about our emotions. Let's be real about our grief and deal with it and be stronger for it.